We were just a shopper and a cashier, but one night trapped together made me see a heart the world always overlooked. I didn't come to this damn supermarket to cry. And I sure as hell didn't expect the cashier to be the one who'd end up holding the broken pieces. The thunder cracked loud enough to shake the automatic doors as I stomped in, dragging water and attitude in equal measure. The store was already emptying out, everyone else smart enough to leave before the storm turned biblical. But I was stubborn. Or maybe I just didn't want to go home. "Ma'am, we're about to close," came a tired voice from behind the register. I glanced over my shoulder. The cashier, short, lean build, soaked sleeves, and eyes that looked like they'd seen the worst of people, didn't flinch when I glared. Asian. Maybe Filipino or Vietnamese. Mid-20s, max. And clearly done with the world. "So ring me up fast," I said, flicking the rain from my coat like I owned the place. She didn't answer. Just turned back to her screen, her fingers dancing over the keys like a quiet rebellion. I almost respected it. Almost. I grabbed the last of what I needed, a bottle of wine I wouldn't finish and some ramen I'd lied to myself about not eating, and dropped it on the counter. She scanned without a word. We didn't even make eye contact until the lights flickered. Then everything went dark. The silence was immediate. Deafening. Just the hum of emergency power and the distant roar of rain beating the roof. I looked at her. She looked at me. "What the hell?" I said. "Storm knocked the power," she muttered, reaching under the counter for her phone. I tried mine too. No signal. No service. And when I went for the automatic doors, locked tight. "You've got to be kidding me," I hissed. "I'm not," she said, calm in a way that made me want to shake her. "We're stuck." I blinked. Stuck. Like, locked in? With each other? She nodded, leaning against the counter like it was a lounge chair. "Looks that way." God. Of all the people. Of all the days. I scanned her face again, this time not just out of irritation. Her jaw clenched when she thought I wasn't looking. Her eyes darted once toward the storm, then down to her hands. She was trying to stay cool, but there was a tightness to her. Like she was used to holding her breath through things. I hated that I recognized it. We stood in silence for a while. Long enough that the emergency lights began to cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. "You always this charming to customers?" I asked. "You always this rude to cashiers?" she shot back. I cracked a smile. Didn't mean to, but it slipped out. She noticed. Was that a smile? Did I just witness a miracle? I leaned on the counter, suddenly aware of how quiet the store had become. "Name's Brielle," I offered. "Before this turns into a hostage situation." "Cam," she said. "Short for Camellia. But don't call me that unless we're dying." "Well, Cam," I said, glancing around, "guess we're halfway there." She snorted. It was the first genuine thing I'd heard from her. Real, raw. Like it surprised her too. Time dragged. We ended up sitting in the break room with flashlights and stale vending machine snacks. She gave me the good chair. Didn't say anything, but it felt like a peace offering. "So," I said between bites of a crushed granola bar, "what's your deal?" She raised an eyebrow. "You trapped me in here and now you want my life story? You were the one working late. You were the one buying wine and noodles at midnight in a storm." Touché. But eventually, the words started coming. She told me about her mom back in Queens. About saving money for art school she might never get into. About the customers who treated her like a machine, or worse, like she was invisible. "People look right through me," she said quietly, eyes on the flickering light. "Unless I mess up. Then suddenly I'm not so invisible." I felt a strange twist in my chest. Because I got it. Different context, sure, but same ache. Same anger. They only see me when I raise my voice, I murmured. And even then, it's just another angry black woman. Cam didn't say anything for a moment. Then she leaned back, staring at the ceiling like it had answers. Maybe that's why we notice each other now, she said. No one else does. I looked at her. Really looked. There was a softness under all that sarcasm. A kind of guarded light. And for the first time that night, the storm outside didn't feel like the worst thing happening. Ever been in love? I asked, surprising myself. She blinked. You always move this fast when you're trapped in a building. I like efficiency. Cam hesitated. Then shrugged. Once. She left when I came out. Said she liked her queerness in theory, not in practice. Ouch. Yeah. You. I chuckled, but it wasn't funny. I fall hard. They don't catch me. She nodded. Said nothing. But her fingers tapped against the chair arm like a rhythm she didn't want to admit she was following. The night deepened. We moved back to the front, sitting on crates behind the counter. Sharing stories. Laughing when we didn't mean to. Grieving in silence when things got too close. And then, out of nowhere, she looked at Miral. I looked and said, "You're not what I expected." I leaned in slightly. Good or bad? Scary, she said softly. Because I could actually like you. My heart did something weird in my chest. And that scares you? I asked. She nodded. I don't trust easy. Neither do I. We sat with that. Let it settle. The distance between us felt both enormous and non-existent. Somewhere past 3 a.m., she fell asleep leaning against the counter. I watched her chest rise and fall, the tiniest smile on her lips like she was dreaming of something good for once. And I realized, in that quiet, broken store full of buzzing lights and forgotten products, I wasn't angry anymore. I was seen. Maybe for the first time in a long time. The sun hadn't risen, but the storm had passed. It was still too early for light, yet there was a soft quiet in the supermarket now, a peace so unfamiliar it made me uneasy. Cam was still asleep, her head resting against a pack of paper towels she dragged over like a makeshift pillow. I'd offered her my coat earlier, half joking, but she actually took it. And then thanked me. Softly. I stayed up. Not because I was restless. But because part of me didn't want the night to end. It had started as one of those bizarre, chaotic nights you just want to forget. But somehow, it had turned into the only thing I wanted to remember. That scared the hell out of me. I'd never felt this before, not with a stranger, not with someone I met doing something so absurd. But Cam wasn't just someone I'd met. She was a person who'd peeled herself open piece by piece, in a way so few ever did. And maybe, just maybe, I had too. She stirred slightly and blinked up at me. You're still awake? I shrugged. Didn't want to miss the part where we get rescued. Cam smiled sleepily, then sat up with a groan. My back is going to hate me for this. I told you the paper towels wouldn't help. They were triple ply. We laughed quietly, and for a few seconds, the empty supermarket felt like the safest place in the world. Time? She asked, stretching. I checked my phone. Still no signal, but the clock read 5:03 a.m. Soon. She nodded. Then her eyes shifted, and something in her face changed. She looked at me longer than usual. What? I asked. You talk in your sleep, she said. My heart jumped. Oh God. What did I say? Something about not being invisible anymore. Her voice was quiet. Gentle. I didn't respond. I didn't know how. Instead, I looked away. focused on the cereal aisle like it might offer salvation. Cam shifted closer. You meant that, didn't you? I nodded, slowly. Yeah. We sat like that for a while, the quiet stretching between us but never straining. She reached over and placed her hand on mine, not saying anything. And I didn't pull away. By the time the sun rose and the lights flickered back on, something between us had shifted. Nothing dramatic, no grand declarations or kisses under collapsing ceilings. Just a glance. A shared breath. A promise too shy to speak aloud. We heard the front door click, system rebooting, the lock releasing. Cam stood first. I followed. But neither of us moved toward the exit. We could walk out now, I said. We could. And pretend none of this happened. Could do that too. But neither of us moved. Brielle, she said, eyes steady on mine, was this just a weird night to you? No, my answer was immediate. Honest. It was. More. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. Good. Me too. We stepped outside together. The air was fresh and wet, the streetlights still blinking uselessly as the morning sun crept over rooftops. It was that rare kind of quiet in the city, the moment just before the world woke up. Cam pulled out a cigarette but didn't light it. Just held it between her fingers. I never do this, she said. Let people in. I believe you. I don't know what comes next. I stepped closer. Neither do I. But I'd like to find out. She nodded slowly, then looked at me with an openness I hadn't seen before. You have somewhere to be? I asked. Nowhere important. Then have breakfast with me. Real food. Not vending machine granola. She smiled. Waffles? Waffles. She tucked the cigarette back into her pocket, then walked beside me toward my car. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Something had begun. And it didn't feel temporary. That morning, we sat across from each other in a dingy diner 2 blocks away, steam rising from mugs of coffee we barely touched. Cam was talking about her art, how she used to draw birds with broken wings because they reminded her of her mom. I told her about my failed attempts at poetry, how my ex had once called my writing too angry to be art. Your ex sounds like a jackass, she said through a bite of bacon. She was. But I guess I needed to learn that anger isn't something to be erased. It's something to be seen. Cam nodded, like she understood that too well. The waitress kept looking at us 2 women laughing softly in a booth by the window, one in a half-wet cashier uniform, the other in an expensive coat she no longer cared about. There was something about the way Cam listened. Really listened. Like my words were a thread she was following through a forest of silence. It made me want to keep talking. It made me want to never leave that booth. But reality doesn't wait. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Work. My other world was calling. Cam noticed. You should go. Yeah. Neither of us moved. I want to see you again, I said. Not by accident. She looked down, then up. I want that too. We exchanged numbers. Simple. Easy. And yet it felt like handing over the key to something unspoken. As I left the diner, she stayed behind. Watching me. I turned back before opening my car door and caught her smile through the glass. It was small. But it was everything. Days passed. Texts turned into calls. Calls into voice notes. Voice notes into long walks after Cam's shifts and quiet coffee dates before mine. She showed me her sketchbook once, hands trembling slightly as she flipped the pages. Her art wasn't just good. It was real. Raw. There was pain in the lines and hope in the colors. She'd drawn Mimi Hair Wild, my eyes heavy with things I hadn't said. "I wanted to remember the first time I saw you," she whispered. "Not when you walked into the store. But when you looked at me like I mattered." I had to blink away the sting behind my eyes. No one had ever drawn me before. Cam wasn't good with emotions, she made that clear. She joked too much, deflected praise, buried her fears under sarcasm. But I was patient. And when I finally kissed her on a park bench, in the dark, while a street performer played a haunting version of Hallelujah, I felt something click. Like I'd been holding my breath for years. And suddenly, I wasn't anymore. Of course, it wasn't perfect. She had days where she pushed me away, afraid of being too much or not enough. I had moments where I doubted I was worth staying for. But we always came back to that night. The storm. The silence. The vending machine snacks and the confessions spilled in the dark. That night became our anchor. Whenever things felt too heavy, we'd joke, could be worse, way could be trapped in a supermarket. And then we'd laugh. But it wasn't really a joke. Because being trapped that night had freed us both. One afternoon, months later, Cam's mom called during dinner. Cam looked shocked, then quiet, then tearful. When she hung up, I took her hand. "She wants to visit," she said, voice shaking. "She wants to meet you." I froze. "Me?" "She says she's trying. Trying to understand. Trying to support." I didn't know what to say. But Cam leaned in, eyes wet and hopeful. "Brielle, I think this is real." I kissed her. Slow. Gentle. And said, "I know it is." We were never just a shopper and a cashier. We were two people the world overlooked. But that night, in the dark, we saw each other. And that changed everything. The first time Cam held my hand in public, it wasn't planned. We were walking through Union Square, the kind of busy Saturday afternoon that made the city feel like it was humming beneath your feet. She reached for me when we crossed the street, not tentative, not dramatic. Just real. Her fingers slid into mine like they'd always belonged there. And I froze. Not because I didn't want it. God, I wanted it. But because my body had been trained for so long to expect the worst when I was seen loving another woman in public. Cam noticed. Her grip didn't loosen. She just squeezed. Lightly. As if to say, "I've got you even if you flinch." And I didn't flinch. That small moment felt bigger than any grand gesture I'd ever been given. Later that night, in her tiny studio apartment with half-painted canvases leaning against every wall, she curled up beside me and whispered, "I want to be brave with you. But I also need you to be patient when I'm not." I kissed her hair and said, "I've got time. All the time you need." Because with Cam, time didn't feel like something I was racing against. It felt like something we were building. Things got harder before they got easier. One Sunday afternoon, we were browsing at a thrift store in Williamsburg. She was looking for old picture frames. I was pretending not to judge the vinyl selection when an older woman bumped into us in the aisle. Cam, being polite, stepped back. I reached out instinctively, resting my hand on the small of her back to steady her. That was it. Just that. A small, human gesture. But the woman's face twisted. Her voice dropped into that sharp, cold tone that was impossible to ignore. "Some people should keep their business private." Cam froze. Her hand jerked away from mine like she'd been burned. The woman walked on, smug. I stood there, pulse roaring in my ears, but Cam's face blank and guarded stopped me from saying anything. She turned and walked out. I followed. Outside, she lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "I'm sorry," she said, before I could speak. "For what?" "For reacting like that. For making it feel like I was ashamed." "You're not," I said. She shook her head. "No. But I hate that I still get scared. That people like her still get to me. I didn't speak right away. I let her finish the cigarette, watching the way the smoke curled against the sky. Then I stepped closer. You don't owe anyone bravery on their terms, Cam. Not even me. She looked at me then, eyes raw. You didn't pull away. I never will. She crushed the cigarette under her boot and kissed me right there on the sidewalk. A teenage boy across the street cheered. We laughed the whole way home. In the weeks that followed, we grew into each other. Cam started sketching again, seriously this time. I convinced her to submit to a small gallery showing in Brooklyn. She was terrified, kept saying I'm not ready every night for a week. But she showed up. She wore a black turtleneck and her nicest jeans, and stood in front of a wall hung with pieces that bled her soul in color. People stared. Some of them cried. And when a woman in her 50s approached to buy the piece titled Invisible Until Loud, Cam looked at me from across the room, and I saw the tears in her eyes before they even fell. Later that night, lying beside her with her sketchbook still open on the bed, I said, I think the world's finally seeing what I saw in you that night. She turned toward me. You saw me scared and half asleep under fluorescent lighting. I saw your heart. Cam reached out, resting her hand over my chest. I saw yours too. Then came the invitation. Her mom. Visiting from Queens. Staying in the city for one weekend. I'd met parents before. Some had been warm. Most had been awkward. A few had been openly hostile. But Cam's mom? This was different. She was raised in a church that doesn't even believe I should be alive, Cam said quietly, eyes glued to her phone the night before. But she's trying. That matters, right? It does, I said. And I'll be there. Cam wore her best button-up shirt. I wore a floral dress that made her eyes widen when I stepped out of the bedroom. You look incredible. I smiled. You're just nervous. I'm a wreck. Her mom met us at a Thai restaurant downtown. She was shorter than I expected. Soft-spoken. Her accent thicker than Cam's, her eyes sharper. She greeted her daughter with a hug that was just a beat too long to be casual. Then she turned to me. Her gaze didn't falter. You are the one who stayed in the supermarket? I blinked. Yes, ma'am. She nodded. Thank you. And just like that, the tension cracked, not shattered, but enough to breathe. Dinner went better than we feared. Her mom asked polite questions. I learned that Cam used to write poems in the margins of her math homework. Cam learned that her mom had quietly been following her art account on Instagram under a fake name. By dessert, the three of us were laughing. It didn't fix everything. But it started something. Cam and I began sleeping at each other's places more than our own. Her closet started to look like mine. My fridge had her favorite weird green tea and a half-open jar of kimchi. One night, I came home from work to find her curled up on my couch, sketching a new piece. She looked up and grinned. I drew us, she said. The canvas showed two women standing in a dim supermarket aisle, light spilling between them like a secret. One wore a red vest. The other, a long coat with rain dripping from the hem. But it was their hands that made me cry. They were reaching, not touching, but almost. The space between them was full of something bigger than either of them. Something waiting to bloom. We had our first real fight 2 months after that. It wasn't over anything huge. I forgot our anniversary. She snapped. I defended myself. Words got sharp. You make me feel like I'm not enough, she said. You make me feel like I have to walk on eggshells, I snapped back. We both went silent. Then she left. For the first time since the supermarket, I felt cold. The next day, she showed up at my door with a drawing. No words. Just a single image. 2 hands. Locked together this time. No space between. I don't know how to say sorry in words, she said. But I don't want this to break. I pulled her into my arms. Held her like she was breath and heartbeat and shelter. We're allowed to fight, I whispered. As long as we remember we're fighting for us. Not against. She nodded into my chest. I love you, I said. She didn't answer. Not then. Not yet. But I felt her love in the way she held me tighter. The first time she said it was months later, in the least romantic setting imaginable. We were in line at the DMV, surrounded by screaming toddlers and flickering lights, Cam fidgeting with the forms to change her address. She looked up mid-sentence and said, God, I love you. Just like that. Like it wasn't a revelation. Like it had always been true. I laughed so hard people stared. She blushed, tried to take it back, then panicked and said it again. And I kissed her there, between booths 12 and 13, in front of an old man who muttered, about damn time. Time passed. Seasons changed. Cam got a real studio space. I started writing again. We still had bad days. Still ran into people who looked at us like we were something broken. But we held hands anyway. We loved anyway. Because once, we were 2 people the world refused to see. Just a shopper and a cashier. But that one night, the night of the storm, the dark, the silence, the ramen and vending machine granulate cracked something open. And now? Now, we were everything to each other. It was Cam's idea to leave the city. Not forever, just a weekend. She'd found a cabin 2 hours upstate. Quiet, wood-framed, overlooking a lake with no name. No signal, no neighbors, no customers yelling about coupons, she said, twirling her keys like it was an invitation to a better life. I agreed before she even finished the sentence. We packed light, her sketchbooks, my half-finished manuscript, snacks we didn't need, and a playlist that was somehow 90% 90s R&B. The drive was full of laughter, sunlight through the windshield, and Cam singing off-key to songs I didn't even know she remembered. You sure we're not gonna kill each other out there? I teased. Cam smirked. You say that like we didn't survive being locked in a supermarket. Point taken. The cabin was everything we didn't know we needed. No Wi-Fi. Just trees, a fireplace, and the kind of stillness that made you hear your own breath. We spent that first night wrapped in blankets, her head in my lap, the fire crackling like some kind of heartbeat. She sketched while I read her paragraphs I hadn't let anyone else see. Her eyes stayed on the page, but every now and then, her fingers brushed mine like punctuation. You're better than you think, she murmured, tracing a line of ink down my wrist. You always say that. Because it's true. The next morning, I found her standing barefoot by the lake, the rising sun spilling gold across her skin. She looked so peaceful, so painfully, beautifully human. I didn't say a word. I just stood beside her, letting the silence stretch like silk between us. Can I tell you something? She whispered, not taking her eyes off the water. Anything. I used to think I wasn't built for love. My chest tightened. Like. Something in me was wrong, she continued. Too defensive, too guarded, too scared of needing people. I reached out, touched her hand. And now? She finally looked at me. Now I think I was just waiting for someone to see me anyway. I kissed her. Not because it was the right moment, but because there was no wrong one anymore. Cam asked me to move in that fall. It wasn't a big, dramatic thing. No candles or balloons or Instagram posts. Just a lazy Sunday morning, curled on the couch with coffee and fuzzy socks, and her saying, "You practically live here anyway. Let's stop pretending." I stared at her. Is this your way of proposing? I asked. She choked on her sip of coffee. What? No. Godinless. Do you want? I laughed so hard she threw a pillow at me. But later, after the laughter faded and the day turned quiet again, I whispered, yes. Yeah, she murmured. Yeah. I'll move in. We didn't sleep much that night. But we didn't need to. The future was too loud in our ears to dream of anything else. And then came that day. The day the old store, the one where we met, announced it was closing. Corporate restructure. New location uptown. The building was being torn down. Cam texted me, her message short. They're gutting it next week. I kind of want to say goodbye. So we went. It was late. The store was empty, shelves half stripped, the flickering buzz of failing lights overhead. Dust in the air. Silence in the aisles. Cam walked ahead of me, her boots echoing across the linoleum floor. She paused at aisle 7. Right here, she said. This was where you dropped the wine. And glared at you like it was your fault, I added. She turned slowly, her eyes soft. I still remember your expression. You were soaked. Annoyed. But also tired. Like something had been heavy for a long time. I stepped closer. And you were pretending not to notice. I always noticed. We stood there, just breathing. The space around us felt like memory, tangible, sacred. And then Cam pulled something from her coat pocket. A folded piece of paper. She handed it to me. It was a sketch. Of us. That first night. Me yelling, her unfazed, fluorescent lights above like halos. But this time, in the corner, she'd written something. You made me visible. I looked up, heart in my throat. And she dropped to one knee. I gasped. Cam. Okay, listen, I didn't plan this. At all. I mean, obviously. She gestured around us. This place smells like mold and expired yogurt. I laughed, already crying. But I couldn't wait anymore, she said, her voice trembling. Brielle, you walked into my life like a hurricane. You made me laugh. You held me when I didn't deserve it. You saw every part of me and never looked away. Tears streamed down my face. I don't need a wedding. I don't need flowers or rings or matching towels. I just need you. Forever. She opened her palm. A small ring. Silver. Simple. It looked like something she'd made herself. I'm a broke artist, she added. But I love you. More than I know how to say. I dropped to my knees with her. Yes, I whispered. Yes to everything. We held each other in aisle 7, between abandoned cereal boxes and broken overhead lights. And I realized some places never stop holding you, even when they're about to disappear. We got married the following spring. Nothing fancy. Just friends, family, mismatched chairs in a Brooklyn community garden, and Cam's mom crying softly as we read our vows. I wore a red dress. Cam wore black. When we kissed, everyone clapped, but it was her trembling hand in mine that made the world fall still. Afterward, she whispered, we did it. And I whispered back, we're doing it. Our lives weren't perfect. Bills came. Grief came. There were days when I wanted to scream and nights when she curled away from me in sleep and I didn't know why. But we stayed. We apologized. We grew. I wrote a book. Cam illustrated the cover. It sold. Modestly. But in the acknowledgments, I wrote. To the cashier in the red vest. I walked in angry. I walked out seen. You changed everything. She cried when she read it. Not quietly. Not prettily. And I loved her more for it. Years passed. We moved to a bigger apartment. Cam opened a community gallery downtown. I started mentoring queer youth writers. We became us. And one day, sitting on our fire escape, she turned to me and said, "Can you believe it all started because I wouldn't let you buy wine in peace?" I grinned. Best inconvenience of my life. She kissed me. The city lights behind her, the world turning, soft and strange and full of meaning. I don't know what happens after this. But I know what did happen. One night. One storm. One fluorescent-lit store in the middle of a tired city. Two women who didn't believe in love. And a moment that cracked the sky open. We were just a shopper and a cashier. But we found love in the silence. We found each other in the dark. And the world finally noticed. Because we made sure of it. The end. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.